see everything.
Welcome to Eyes on Intel. Today is Wednesday, June 3rd, 2026. If you give a tyrant a ruler, they will always try to tell you where the world ends, where their ownership begins. That is not metaphor. It is the operational logic of power. Every inch of measurement becomes a claim of jurisdiction. Every boundary becomes a pretext for enforcement. Every pretext becomes a mechanism for extraction. Before we peel back the layers of the state's latest theater, remember that this broadcast stays free, unaligned, and completely uncompromised because of you. We do not take corporate grants, state subsidies, or private equity blood money. That matters because every institution that accepts capital becomes accountable to capital. Every outlet that accepts state funding becomes an extension of state messaging. To keep this analytical engine running against the very forces of extraction we expose, please consider subscribing and donating. Let us keep our eyes sharp together. Tonight at 9 p.m., the artificial partitions crumble slightly in Newark, New Jersey. Mayor Ras Baraka announced the lifting of the emergency curfew and those absurdly designated free speech zones surrounding the Delaney Hall containment facility. Understand the mechanics. Curfews are not about safety. They are about control of public space. Free speech zones are not about speech. They are about isolating dissent from the public eye. When Baraka lifts them, it is not benevolence. It is a recalibration of risk. The administration is responding to pressure, not conscience. The optics of state-sponsored violence, state police enforcing corporate boundaries on a restive working class, became too heavy a liability for the municipal administration. The videos circulating online were not just embarrassing, they were destabilizing. They exposed the alignment between municipal authority and private detention capital. They revealed the city's willingness to deploy force to protect a corporate asset. The street can only be throttled for so long before the infrastructure itself begins to crack under the pressure of its own internal contradictions. When repression becomes too visible, it stops functioning as deterrence and starts functioning as recruitment for resistance. When the state establishes a temporary free speech zone, it is explicitly telling you that the rest of the geography is a zone of total censorship and compliance. It is a spatial enclosure designed to quarantine dissent and keep the smooth mechanics of capital extraction invisible to the passing commuter. This is not accidental. It is a technique refined across decades of protest management. From WTO in Seattle to Ferguson to Standing Rock, the goal is always the same: isolate the dissenters, sanitize the optics, and maintain the illusion of democratic participation while ensuring no disruption to the flow of capital. Simultaneously, the city of Newark is attempting to expand its existing litigation against the GEO Group, a direct bid to permanently shutter the Delaney Hall facility. This is not a sudden moral awakening. It is a political maneuver triggered by exposure. Business Administrator Eric Pennington threatens to throw the city's weight behind local advocate lawsuits. That is a signal that the city is trying to reposition itself as an adversary of GEO, not because it opposes the model, but because the model has become too publicly radioactive. This legal theater intensifies after the private prison giant physically barred city and state health inspectors from crossing the threshold. That act is not just defiance, it is a declaration of sovereignty. GEO is asserting that its contract supersedes municipal authority. It is claiming that its internal operations are exempt from public oversight. That is the logical endpoint of privatization, a corporation that treats public law as an optional suggestion. Consider the raw material reality here. A multi-billion-dollar private contractor is claiming total sovereignty over a piece of municipal soil, declaring its human warehousing operation immune to basic health and safety codes. This is not a glitch. It is the business model. The less oversight, the higher the profit margin. The more invisible the bodies, the more efficient the extraction. It is capital unmasked, a corporate entity asserting that the bodies caged inside its walls are private property, shielded from scrutiny, optimized for throughput. When a private corporation can deny entry to state health officials, the illusion of public governance dissolves entirely. What remains is the real architecture: corporate contracts superseding sovereign public health laws, leaving the human beings inside exposed to deliberate, profit-driven degradation. This is not mismanagement. It is design. To manage the fallout, Baraka announced that the Newark Police Department will take a dominant role in monitoring the ongoing demonstrations. This is not reform. It is a substitution. Federal tactical forces became too visible, Too brutal, too politically costly, so the city swaps them out for municipal blues to soften the optics. The objective remains unchanged: protect the asset, secure the perimeter, maintain the extraction of wealth from the bodies of the displaced. The local police department acts as a cosmetic buffer zone, a shock absorber for the state designed to prevent the immediate radicalization of the domestic working class. The uniform changes, but the mission does not. The state hopes that familiar faces will pacify the crowd, that municipal branding will obscure federal intent. This structural friction manifested on the exterior asphalt as engineered horizontal hostility. Competing factions of pro-enforcement and anti-caging demonstrators clashing directly outside the gates. This is not spontaneous. It is the state's oldest trick, convincing workers to fight workers while the owning class collects the dividends behind reinforced glass. When the working class is divided, the extraction machine runs without interruption. This local crisis is reverberating straight to the top of the federal enforcement hierarchy. The Department of Homeland Security fired back with a venomous statement targeting New Jersey's sanctuary politicians, weaponizing high-profile arrests to dismiss the documented accounts of starvation and medical neglect as mere leftist smears. This is not just rhetoric. It is a strategic counter-narrative designed to delegitimize eyewitness testimony, neutralize public outrage, and reassert federal dominance over the informational battlefield. When the state is cornered, it attacks the credibility of the witnesses before it ever addresses the evidence. The rhetoric is calculated to preserve the legitimacy of a crumbling infrastructure. DHS cannot allow the public to internalize the reality that its detention architecture is failing on every axis: medical, legal, ethical, operational, so it reframes structural abuse as partisan exaggeration. But the reality on the ground refuses to be sanitized. The testimonies, the leaked footage, the inspector reports, the hunger strikes, these are material facts that cannot be erased by press releases. Out in Corpus Christi, Texas, the machine validated its real purpose through a rapid, one-day targeted sweep, 24 human beings extracted from their communities in a single operational cycle. Understand the mechanics. These sweeps are not about public safety. They are about throughput. They are about demonstrating capacity. They are about feeding bodies into a system that requires constant intake to justify its budget, its personnel, its expansion. Human labor and family structures are treated as disposable externalities because the system is not designed to preserve them. It is designed to process them. They parade the arrest of a single previously deported individual with a criminal record as a model for national enforcement priorities. This is the classic carceral sleight of hand: highlight one dangerous case to justify the mass targeting of people who pose no threat. It is the same tactic used to justify stop and frisk, gang databases, and broken windows policing. Manufacture a narrative of danger, then use it to rationalize indiscriminate enforcement. Under the direction of Secretary Markwayne Mullin, the apparatus is shifting into a state of hypervelocity enforcement. This is not rhetorical exaggeration. It is a measurable acceleration in operational tempo. The executive mandate is clear: execute mass expulsions at an unprecedented scale. That requires logistical restructuring, more transport contracts, more detention bed quotas, more court dockets, more rapid processing units. Human lives are being reduced to throughput metrics, line item liabilities to be wiped from the imperial ledger. The system is not malfunctioning. It is performing exactly as designed. Even the temporary concessions are laced with cruelty. DHS announced a 6-month extension of temporary protected status for roughly 7,000 Lebanese nationals currently within the borders. On paper, this looks like relief. In practice, it is a countdown clock. A 6-month lease on survival. A reminder that the state views their right to exist as a conditional privilege. This is not protection. It is suspended precarity. It keeps workers in a state of permanent vulnerability, unable to plan, unable to organize, unable to resist exploitation. This deliberate generation of legal precarity serves a precise economic function. A workforce that fears deportation is a workforce that will not strike. A workforce that fears removal is a workforce that will accept wage theft, unsafe conditions, and predatory landlords. Agricultural and industrial capital rely on this fear. It is not incidental, it is foundational. The state maintains the threat of removal because the threat itself is a tool of economic discipline. But if you want to see the true blueprint of the coming paradigm, you have to look at the maneuvers unfolding under the radar. The administration is discussing halting all customs and immigration operations at international gateways within sanctuary hubs, specifically Newark, New York, and Los Angeles. This is not a policy proposal. It is a threat. A demonstration of federal willingness to weaponize economic infrastructure to punish political noncompliance. Think about the structural violence embedded in that concept. The federal government is threatening to choke out the economic lifelines of its own major metropolitan centers. International airports are not just travel nodes. They are supply chain arteries, they are labor corridors, they are commercial engines. Shutting down customs operations would disrupt global logistics, delay shipments, ground flights, and destabilize local economies. All to force municipalities into acting as auxiliary deportation officers. It is an act of economic warfare aimed squarely at the urban working class. The wealthy will reroute through private terminals. Corporations will absorb the delays, but workers, airport staff, delivery drivers, hospitality workers, small businesses will bear the brunt. This is the state demonstrating that it is willing to sabotage general commerce to preserve the supremacy of its border enforcement architecture. This is accompanied by a coordinated, bureaucratic assault on the legal infrastructure itself. DHS has instructed its attorneys to aggressively pursue administrative fraud cases and punitive civil penalties against immigration defense lawyers. This is not about fraud. It is about deterrence. It is about making the act of legal advocacy itself dangerous. If you terrorize the defense bar, you reduce the number of lawyers willing to take cases. If you reduce the number of lawyers, you increase the number of unrepresented migrants. If you increase the number of unrepresented migrants, you increase the number of rapid removal orders. If you eliminate the lawyers, you eliminate the friction inside the machine. That is the goal. This feeds directly into the rollout of mass deportation hearings known as mega masters. Understand what that term actually encodes. These are not hearings in any meaningful judicial sense. They are high-volume processing events. Immigration courts are packing 100 or more human cases into a single, chaotic, hour-long session that is not adjudication. That is throughput optimization. It is an assembly line structure engineered to generate removal orders at scale. The system is designed so that anyone who slips through the cracks, anyone who misses a notice, anyone who cannot secure counsel, anyone who cannot navigate the bureaucratic maze gets funneled into automatic expulsion. The timeline is incompatible with human dignity by design. The state is not trying to determine truth. It is trying to clear a backlog. It is trying to meet quotas. It is trying to demonstrate operational velocity to political overseers who measure success in numbers, not lives. And through it all, the architects of this violence maintain a posture of total, unyielding denial. Secretary Mullen and top administration officials are rejecting every single report of abuse, starvation, and systemic torture within Delaney Hall. This is not mere PR. It is a strategic refusal to acknowledge material conditions. If they admit the existence of maggot-infested food, they admit negligence. If they admit beatings of bilingual detainees who try to translate medical forms for their brothers, they admit deliberate cruelty. If they admit deliberate cruelty, they admit liability, so they deny everything. They speak of law and order, while federal mediators are quietly assigned to the crisis. They speak of transparency while local inspectors remain locked out in the parking lot. They speak of safety while detainees report untreated infections, withheld medication, and retaliatory isolation. The gap between rhetoric and reality is not accidental. It is the operational shield that allows the machine to continue functioning. They deny the maggot-infested food because acknowledging it would expose the supply chain contracts that incentivize cost-cutting at the expense of human survival. They deny the beatings because acknowledging them would expose the internal disciplinary culture that rewards violence as a tool of compliance. They deny the translators being assaulted because acknowledging it would expose the deliberate suppression of communication, because communication leads to documentation, and documentation leads to accountability. To admit the truth is to admit that the border is not a line on a map. It is an ongoing act of class warfare. It is an artificial fracture engineered to shatter worker solidarity. It is a mechanism for ensuring that the global poor remain compliant, isolated, and easily extracted. The border is not geography. It is infrastructure. It is a system of sorting, filtering, and disciplining labor. It is a tool for maintaining a global hierarchy of value where some bodies are protected and others are processed. The walls they build are thick, but they are built on shifting sands. The system relies on secrecy, on isolation, on the invisibility of the people it cages. But every leak, every testimony, every protest outside Delaney Hall destabilizes that invisibility. No amount of concrete can permanently suppress the shared humanity that connects us across their imaginary lines. The state can enforce borders, but it cannot erase the material reality that workers across those borders share the same interests, the same vulnerabilities, the same enemies. And as always, please remember open hearts, open minds,